You're sitting in a meeting, someone is talking, you're watching them, and then, for about 1.5 seconds, you're gone. No warning, no choice, you just stopped being there. Then you're back. The person is still talking. Everyone around you is nodding. You nod too. You have no idea what anyone said. And if you have ADHD, a study published in March 2026 now has a name for what just happened to you. Your brain went to sleep. A small patch of your frontal cortex, the part responsible for keeping you focused and on task, briefly switched into deep sleep mode. Eyes open, body upright, brain in that region producing the same oscillating waves it produces at 3 a.m. during dreamless sleep. This happens to everyone occasionally. In people with ADHD, it happens constantly. The study found it was happening so frequently that it statistically accounts for most of the attention gap between ADHD brains and neurotypical ones. Slow wave density was the mediating variable. Remove the waves, you largely close the gap. This is the part that changes how ADHD gets talked about. Have you ever been reading a page and reached the bottom with no memory of the top? Or sat through a lecture and realised at some point that you were no longer in the room? You came back. You don't know exactly when you left. That's the thing. There's no sensation of it happening. You don't feel yourself go. One moment you're there, the next you already are again, and the gap in the middle is invisible from the inside. People with ADHD know this feeling. They've known it their whole lives. Most of them were told it was a choice. The brain doesn't sleep uniformly. When you're tired, specific regions drop into what researchers call local sleep. Brief off periods where neurons in a patch of cortex temporarily stop firing. The thalamic reticular nucleus can trigger these in isolated areas while the rest of the brain stays awake and running. In an EEG, local sleep looks identical to deep NREM sleep at that electrode. High amplitude, low frequency oscillations between 1 and 4 Hz. The slow wave signature of genuine deep sleep in a brain that is technically, behaviorally, awake. This is a normal phenomenon. The brain does it when it's fatigued, when a task gets repetitive, when sustained attention runs long. Think of it as the brain taking micro breaks it didn't ask your permission to take. ADHD brains take far more of them, and the regions that go offline tend to be the ones you need. The study didn't just find that ADHD brains produce more slow waves. It found that the slow waves are doing the work. They're carrying the attention deficit, which raises an uncomfortable question about what ADHD actually is. Elaine Pingal and Thomas Andrelon at Monash University and the Paris Brain Institute recruited 63 young adults, average age 23. 32 had a formal ADHD diagnosis. All ADHD participants went off their medication for 72 hours before the experiment. The task: a screen flashing numbers 1 through 9 continuously for 52 minutes. Press a button for every number except 3. Simple enough to be relentless. Boring enough to expose whatever the brain does when attention starts to fail. Every 40 to 70 seconds, the task paused and asked, what were you just thinking about? On task, mind wandering, mind's blanking, or can't remember. The ADHD group made significantly more errors, both the impulsive kind and the zoned out kind. Their reaction times were slower and more variable. They reported more unintentional mind wandering, not deliberate, just gone, and more episodes of mind blanking, where conscious thought dried up entirely. And their slow wave density was substantially higher, concentrated over the frontal and parietal regions. The researchers then ran what's called a mediation analysis. The question: does slow wave density explain the gap between the two groups? The answer was yes. The slow waves statistically mediated the ADHD-related attention failures, particularly for lapse rate and reaction time variability. This is not a correlation finding, this is a mechanism finding. Thomas Andrelon put it directly: in people with ADHD, this activity is more frequent. Our results suggest that it could be a key brain mechanism explaining their difficulties in maintaining stable attention and performance over time. One more finding from the study, and this one matters. The ADHD participants didn't report being more sleepy in general. They reported being sleepier during the task. Their brains weren't starting the day more exhausted. They fatigued faster under sustained cognitive effort. This is consistent with something researchers are starting to call a vigilance regulation problem. The ADHD brain's boundary between wakefulness and sleep is more porous than a neurotypical brain's. Under repetitive or sustained demand, it slips across that boundary more readily, more often, and in the regions that cost the most. Every school exam that went wrong, every meeting where you lost the thread, every book page you read 3 times, every time someone watched you zone out and said you weren't trying. Your frontal cortex had briefly gone to sleep for 1.5 seconds, then again. That's a measurable event. It shows up on an EEG. It has a density count. It has a name in peer-reviewed literature published in the Journal of Neuroscience. It predates the accusation by decades. It was always there. ADHD has been framed for a long time primarily as a dopamine problem. The reward circuitry underperforming, the motivational system misfiring. That's real, and the research on it is solid. What the 2026 Pingal study adds is a separate layer, a sleep-wake boundary problem. The brain slipping into sleep state dynamics during wakefulness, producing the attention failures as a direct result. A December 2025 study from Washington University School of Medicine, published in Cell, found that stimulant medications like methylphenidate work not by directly improving attention circuits, but by acting on the brain's wakefulness and reward centers, and that they produce brain activity patterns that mimic the effect of good sleep. If sleep deprivation amplifies local sleep intrusions and stimulants reverse the sleep deprivation signature in brain scans, there's now a plausible chain. Stimulants may work partly by suppressing the waking slow waves that were driving the attention failures all along. Elaine Pingal's own research path confirms the connection. Her interest in waking slow waves grew from earlier work showing that methylphenidate reduced slow wave occurrences in neurotypical adults. That result pointed her at ADHD. There's also a non-drug direction worth knowing. Auditory stimulation timed to slow waves during sleep, played at low volume as you sleep, has been shown in neurotypical adults to strengthen overnight slow wave activity. The hypothesis is that if slow wave sleep is properly completed at night, the brain has less need to produce it during waking hours. That hasn't been tested directly in ADHD populations yet. The research pipeline is clearly pointed there. Andrillion said this about the slow wave finding. These local sleep waves could become a key biomarker for diagnosis. Currently, ADHD diagnosis is behavioral. Symptom checklists, observer reports, clinical history. There is no objective biological test. If waking slow wave density can be reliably measured and used as a marker, the diagnostic picture changes. The treatment picture changes. The question of who gets identified and when changes. For everyone who got to adulthood before any of this was understood, you were being measured against a brain state your brain wasn't in. You were in local sleep, repeatedly, involuntarily, and without knowing it. That's not a character assessment, that's physiology. Drop a comment if any part of this matched something you've experienced. The more specific, the better.